Your Excellency, and my dear fellow warriors in the pro-life world, or as the FBI calls you, the radical violent extremists, it's delightful to be here. And it's great to be back into the Eternal City, where I understand a new resident hails from my hometown. Speaking of Chicago, I was born and raised in the rough and tumble, windy city, the city of big shoulders, Chicago, where Catholicism and democratic machine politics were in my lifeblood. Chicago is infamous as the home of the mafia boss, Al Capone, the political base of the radical activist Saul Alinsky, the author of The Rules for Radicals, which was dedicated to Lucifer. It's the corporate home of the Hyatt hotels, the billionaire Pritzker family, the sugar daddy of the transgender movement. It's the adoptive home of President Barack Obama, the home of Hillary Clinton, the home of John Podesta of Pizzagate fame, and the Episcopal home of Joseph Bernardine, the seamless garment guru who was modeled after Malachi Martin's satanic character in Windswept House. Well, the Windy City has brought in quite a cast of characters. But I'd like to reflect today on my legal career in child advocacy and missing children. I believe it was preordained. As the oldest of 6 children, chasing after my younger siblings, I learned the skills of looking for missing children. As Catholics, we were known by our street address, not known by our street address, nor even our neighborhood. We identified ourselves from our parish. We were from Queens, Queen of All Saints. And this was the heyday of the great American big city Catholicism, thriving parishes, overcrowded Catholic schools, a time when the Catholic Church's charity and mercy was not dependent on federal grants and government handouts, but on the generosity of its parishioners. The Church's idea of diversity was an Italian church, a Polish church, an Irish church, and a German church in every neighborhood. My success in finding missing and abducted children and human trafficking victims was solely due to my investigative partners, Mary, Michael, and Anthony. When looking for that needle in the haystack, I needed all the help I could get from the Blessed Mother, St. Michael the Archangel, and St. Anthony. Never could I have imagined that I would end up investigating priests, bishops, cardinals for child sex abuse and their cover-ups. Never could I have imagined that this would be my work. Never could I imagine that the Holy See could celebrate a gay pride parade into St. Peter's Basilica, or a pope worshiping a pagan idol in St. Peter's Basilica over the bones of St. Peter, or a pope lunching with transgenders, or the Catholic Church collecting billions from the federal government to facilitate human sex trafficking through mass migration. Somewhere along the way, Christ's admonition to let the little children lead has been forgotten. Modernity has declared all-out war on children. The global elite demanded that children be aborted, exploited, silenced, trafficked, killed, euthanized, sterilized, transitioned, corrupted, pornified, groomed, sexualized, surrogated, genitally mutilated, bioengineered, drugged, regendered, transgendered, bigendered, sold, sliced and diced for body parts, for vaccines, for experimentation, drugged and sacrificed on the demonic high altar of depopulation. In the prescient words of Father Malachi Martin, Satan is on the march, and the rich and famous are in lockstep as they snuff out life, obliterate innocence, dismantle the family, and destroy freedom by engaging in modern slavery. Here's a generally accepted definition of human trafficking used around the world. The music from Sound of Freedom. Many of you may have heard that movie, seen that movie. Well, sex trafficking is happening everywhere, and although slavery has existed through the centuries, never has it flourished as it has now. Why? And who is behind it? What is its impact on society? And finally, how do we stop it in its tracks? That's my challenge today. Soros and human trafficking. You'll notice on the lower left-hand side, child trafficking is one of his major agenda items to destroy the church. This demonic octopus with his global tentacles operates in secret. He knows no boundaries and devours its victims. George Soros, often called the connoisseur of chaos, famously observed, "The worse a situation becomes, the less it takes to turn it around, and the bigger the upside." Well, his master plan, implemented by the UN with a network of 240 NGOs, principally Catholic charities, working with paramilitary and drug smuggling cartels, is destabilizing the world with mass illegal immigration under the Orwellian doublespeak of human rights and human dignity. Within 10 years, the UN's Fast and Furious Replacement Migration Program, with promises of a sustainable way of life, is creating civilization hell. So let's get down to the basics. Who are the victims of human trafficking?
I was promised a better life.
Far away from my home.
I used to have a family.
Now, I must pay for my family's debts.
I sleep with many men every day. They make me.
Kill. For a war.
Work many long hours.
Trapped.
Beaten.
Scared.
Locked in the dark.
With no way out.
I want to go home.
I want my
Freedom.
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 Well, first world countries, like the United States, create the demand, and the poor countries provide the supply. The International Labor Organization reports that nearly 50 million people are trafficked around the globe. Even 134 countries have criminalized trafficking in law, yet despite these stringent laws, its growth is soaring. Yet in my experience, human trafficking cases remain the most difficult to solve. Trafficking victims are drugged, beaten, threatened, terrorized, and bonded by trauma to their abusers, and they're always on the move. A few sobering facts for today. Human trafficking is now the second most profitable criminal activity in the United States. 12 to 14 is the average age of entry into sex trafficking. Traffickers market and target minor victims online, on the street, in large public places such as sporting events, shopping malls, or through friends or recruitments by other youth at schools, after-school programs, and on the internet. No child is immune. In the United States, underage victims make up 50% of the detective trafficked individuals. A recent study found that 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys are sexually molested. While most of them are not trafficked, their molestation makes them vulnerable to traffickers. Jaw-dropping data points that one rapist has been allowed to rape 260 children on average before ever being caught. An estimated 3 to 5% of the general population are believed to be pedophiles. The FBI contends that only 1 to 10% of all incidents involving child molestation even gets reported to law enforcement. Hence, child sexual abuse is the most underreported crime by far. Is it any wonder that human trafficking is flourishing? Who are the purveyors of human trafficking? Trafficking is an equal opportunity employer. It serves as a protected and hallowed right of the global elite, street thugs, terrorists, and organized crime. This lucrative criminal enterprise saturates all levels of society, from the high society European halls of power and royalty, to the islands of the Caribbean, to global corporate boardrooms, every shire in England, every province in Italy, every county in America. It is protected by corruption, complacency, and denial. But traffickers operate in plain sight, like the UK Pakistani grooming rape gangs, who for 35 years destroyed the lives of tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of young British girls. Or the global criminal networks of violent drug lords and transnational cartels like ISIS and Boko Haram, MS-13, Tren de Agua, who rape and pillage villages and towns. I literally stumbled upon the devastating effects of human trafficking in my child protection legal work. Missing children were not only missing from their homes, they were exploited by society's worst criminals. So, when I was invited to attend Pope Francis's first human trafficking conference in November of 23, just a mere 6 months after he became Pope, I was quite excited. Oops, let me go back. There I was. Find Waldo on the page. But a not-so-funny thing happened to me on the way to Rome. Nothing prepared me for what I was to experience. In November of 2013, I attended the Human Trafficking Conference at the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences, located right in the middle of the Vatican Gardens, sponsored by the Vatican. My expectation was that the Holy See would vigorously provide the moral leadership to attack this global plague of sexual predation. The Catholic Church, founded by Jesus Christ, who mightily warned mankind that if anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. But I was stunned by what awaited me at the Human Trafficking Conference. I was immediately struck by the baffling and uneasy feeling that I was in enemy territory. How could this be? Among the attendees were officials from the Obama administration, leftists from the UN, and a variety of international NGOs. To my horror, I heard these invited Vatican speakers espouse the absurd argument that climate change was one of the causes of human trafficking. I nearly laughed out loud. I felt a sense of dread and foreboding and even betrayal that something was amiss. A radical shift was underway early in the Francis regime. During the conference, an American friend turned to me and whispered, "Are we the only pro-lifers here?" His comments spoke volumes. Why was the Vatican Human Trafficking Conference promoting a universal basic income? Why was this Vatican advancing global migration into Europe? Why was the Vatican promoting, of all people, Jeffrey Sachs, the acolyte of George Soros and the demonic UN Agenda 2030? What did any of this have to do with human trafficking? Frankly, I thought that the Vatican, which had covered up clergy sex abuse, was now engaging in another cover-up. This time, the cover-up involved lying and obfuscating about the causes of human trafficking. Nothing during this conference reflected my own firsthand real experience investigating human trafficking. No mention of the battle of good versus evil endemic in human trafficking. What was going on here? Shockingly, they promoted the United Nations and its New World Order, promoted through the Sustainable Development Goals. The Vatican, through its considerable moral weight and gravitas, and launched a full-scale, no-holds-bar PR campaign behind the globalist UN Agenda 2030, Agenda 21, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, a global plan to impose totalitarianism on the world under the guise of Build Back Better and the Great Reset climate action. I slowly began to understand the high-stakes game that the Vatican was playing on behalf of the UN. The real and bloodthirsty crisis of human trafficking served as a convenient stalking horse, deployed to promote the godless agenda of the UN with the specious and insulting argument, if we eliminate our carbon footprint, we would end human trafficking. It was laughable and it was highly deceptive. The Vatican, like the UN, perpetuated and panhandled the climate crisis hoax as the justification for the UN-led rapid mass migration into Europe and to the United States. They actually, with a straight face, pitched the argument that the climate crisis was driving mass migration around the world, as if it were an organic movement driving people out of their homeland, rather than a coordinated operation funded by Soros to topple Christian civilizations. The UN facilitated mass illegal immigration through the network of their NGOs, most prominently Catholic Charities and Catholic Relief Services, along with U.S. taxpayer dollars. And it was the end of the world as we would know it and the imposition of a new world order through the Agenda 2030. Mass migration provided the means to impose and to destroy the nation state and Christianity. And in 2015, Francis stood foursquare behind the UN Agenda 2030, a comprehensive plan which included at least 1 million asylum seekers into Europe annually. We now see the massive chaos, the crime, the instability, the human trafficking, the sexual exploitation of women and children on a massive scale. And the plan worked like clockwork in Europe and later in the United States, where now we see anywhere from 10 to 20 million illegals entering our country, and contrary to assurances, human trafficking did not end, it soared. I call them, and I hope everybody will remember this slide, the genocidal development goals. And if you read them, it's quite interesting. The end of poverty, the end of poor education. We will bring complete justice. It is certainly utopia on earth. But behind these goals are the targets, and the targets are abortion, and the targets are the LGBT, radical destabilization of the family. And as we can see, this is the agenda for the 2030 mission goals. These are the things, many of which, of course, are already happening right before our eyes. And here is one example. Let's see if I can. Here is one example. In a document of the UN, buried in one of the targets, which promotes homosexual education in kindergarten, actually in preschool, and first grade, ensuring that little children will have sexual partners. And why would the Vatican ever partner with or promote the UN Sustainable Development Goals? Because buried in those goals are contraception, our abortion, is the radical sexualization of our children and the transgender agenda. The Sustainable Development Goals are built on lies and illusory promises. Population control disguised as health. Propaganda disguised as education and equity. Their stated targets of eliminating poverty, they promise to restore perfect health, justice for all, equality for the birds and the trees. It's all a global head fake. Beneath the glossy PR media campaign is a subversive global plan of compliance, subjugation, digital IDs, geometric surveillance, otherwise known as the China social credit model. The end of nation states and family units and private property and home and car ownership, mandating multiple vaccines, universal austerity income, government ownership of children, destruction of genders, we see that on a daily basis, microchipping, that's next, and end of fossil fuels and all modern conveniences. Welcome to Agenda 23rd, signed, sealed, and delivered with a papal imprimatur. We're now reeling from the massive UN propaganda agenda, which has saturated our societies with transgender mania. Next up, I predict, is the promotion of pedophilia as a natural sexual preference that must be embraced by society. Why was the Vatican promoting the abortion-laden, depopulation-promoting radical UN Sustainable Development Goals as a panacea for human trafficking? The Vatican urged the conference attendees, I was there, I heard it myself, to lobby their respective countries to pass the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Treaty. And they promised at the Vatican, if this was done, we would end human trafficking in 2020. Well, I was sitting there thinking, 2020, hopefully I'll live by the 2020, so I'll be able to see the end of human trafficking. Well, really, that was quite a whopper of a promise and absurd on its face. And of course, as I tracked this promise that the Vatican promised, like the UN had promised, the goalposts kept on moving. And they do this with all the Sustainable Development Goals. The next Vatican Conference on Human Trafficking promised that human trafficking would end in 2025. And by the time Jeffrey Sachs talked at the UN, human trafficking was going to end by 2030. This is what they do. They don't think anybody's going to hold them accountable. Read the Soros-funded 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, which I guarantee, as I said, utopia on earth, ending poverty, and ending ignorance, ending injustice, ending inequity, and ending human trafficking. Heaven on earth. Brought to you by the unelected bureaucrats of the UN and the EU. Reduce your carbon footprint, and criminal traffickers will disappear into the ecosphere. Just as the American bishops sold out the Catholic Church for federal immigration grants, greenbacks, once again the money lenders were inside the temple. And what is going on? I think Archbishop Vigano describes it quite succinctly, that the elites have infiltrated the highest levels of Western institutions to implement their criminal plan. Admittedly, I witnessed firsthand and up close very early on in the Francis Vatican the usurpation and transfer of papal power into the hands of the globalists. Francis and his minions had sold the church's sacred treasure, its moral voice, to the radical, demonic agenda of the global elite at the UN, the WEF, the WHO, Davos. They marched in lockstep with the lockdown of our churches, of our schools, and of our sacraments. I saw beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Vatican traded away the most vulnerable, the most desperate women and children to a diabolical overlord who not only cared nothing for them, but also policies which would cause human trafficking to proliferate around the world. The UN and its Vatican manservant had no intention of abating the menace of global human trafficking. I understood that ending human trafficking would only depend on the people of Jesus Christ, we the people. The tragedy was articulated again in the words of Vigano, who said this global coup d'etat to establish a planetary agenda which will enslave everyone. They infiltrated and usurped the one remaining governing entity which would have stopped them in their tracks, the Holy See. On my return from the Vatican, I vowed that I would scrutinize, track, research, analyze every statement, every action, every partnership of the Francis Vatican. I could not and I would not remain silent as the Vatican paid homage to the diabolical globalists. I didn't have to wait long until my instincts proved correct. In September of 2015, Francis traveled to the United States, addressed the UN, and stamped his papal seal on the Paris Climate Treaty and on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There was no joy, folks, in being right. The disaster continued to unfold. In 2015, Soros funded the globalist-inspired mass migration into Europe, and the Catholic Church served as the facilitator and the distribution network on behalf of the cartels, fostering an unprecedented surge in human trafficking around the world. The business of illegal mass migration was as lucrative as the green eco scam. Just ask Al Gore. And apparently, the climate green theology hoax is continuing with Leo, who theatrically blessed a block of ice from Greenland this past month to warn the world about global warming. You see, the Vatican has learned the important lesson from modernity. The image is the message. That's what Marshall McLuhan reminded us. The image is the message. So what is this diabolical plan that's going to be enveloping all of us unless the people in this room stand up? The implementation of the UN Sustainable Development Goals is ongoing in the church and in our parishes. 193 countries, including the Vatican, signed the Sustainable Development Goals, which in reality compels humanity to relinquish their sovereignty, their individual liberty to an unknown and unaccountable totalitarian authority. This master one world government erases all cultural, religious, legal, and moral identity from the nation state and imposes a one world order with promises of utopia on earth. And the Catholic Church is erasing and supplanting Catholicism with a new synodal church, which will bring in the eradication of dogma, the destruction of our faith and our sacraments. This cunning and diabolical global plan of Agenda 2030 includes at its core dismantling the family, destruction of innocence of children, and the eradication of Christianity and the subjugation of all the masses to a totalitarian rule. Our globalist betters, the elites, the self-appointed, unaccounted wizards of Oz, the European Union, the United Nations, Davos, Bilderberg, Open Society, G20, and the Synodal Church of Francis and Leo, and deep state complicit politicians, greedy NGOs plot to eradicate social identity, peace, and prosperity through mass migration of unknown persons from the third world who flaunt and violate the values and laws of the host nation. As we've seen since 2015, unrestrained migration into Europe has caused crime to soar and imploded our beautiful Europe. Churches and cathedrals have been burned to the ground by invaders. Priests have been stabbed to death. Soaring sexual crimes against women and children by violent Islamists who refuse to assimilate, contribute, and integrate into the host culture and outright defy our laws and societal interventions. The Soros migrant master plan has masterfully worked in Europe, and it's now on steroids in the United States. The case in point, the mass invasion of the third world into the United States from 21 to 24, the unrestrained invasion of over 10 to 20 illegal migrants into the United States. The volume, the rapidity, and the recklessness of this invasion is causing an educational, a cultural, a societal, a financial shockwave in the United States. And the new bishop of the U.S. Conference on Catholic Bishops identifies immigration as a burning issue. Leo urged the U.S. bishops to speak out loudly about immigration. It's a burning issue, all right, as our cities and our cathedrals and churches are burned to the ground, as innocent young girls are burned, as thousands of homes in California and thousands of acres are burned to the ground. This illegal invasion facilitated by the Catholic Church, the multi-billion-dollar U.S. government grantee, resulted in Mexican cartels' income from smuggling illegal immigrants into America. It soared from $500 million in 2018 to $13 billion in 2022, up 2,500%. Fentanyl deaths has skyrocketed from 1,280% in just Los Angeles alone. Over 100,000 Americans are dying from fentanyl poisoning, and we constantly hear nothing but stone-cold silence from our bishops. This illegal invasion has sparked a massive and unprecedented catastrophic crisis with over 452,000 unaccompanied minor children lost and missing in the United States. Imagine that, nearly 500,000 children disappearing into thin air. This, bishops, is a burning issue in the hearts of Americans. The U.S. border invasion is a predator's paradise. Imagine for a moment the magnitude of this disaster. Nearly 500,000 children. For you Italians, that's almost the size of Bologna. 500,000 children who do not speak English. 500,000 children who have no protector, no parent, no guardian. 500,000 children surrounded by strangers. 500,000 children who arrive at our border with no identification, who arrive at our border at the behest of a violent cartel member. A child with only a little Post-it note attached to its clothing with a delivery address. For heaven's sakes, an Amazon package has more identity than these children crossing the border. Arguably, these are certainly some of the most vulnerable children on the planet. And what could go wrong? Apparently, everything. And listen to this brave whistleblower who stepped up and finally began to expose the truth behind the bishop's so-called humanitarian pipeline.
How could this be family reunification if the children didn't know who they were going to?
In this episode, I sit down with HHS whistleblower Tara Rodas. A federal employee for 2 decades, she was among a number of people who answered a call from the Biden administration to help with the crisis at the border.
Honestly, if I had not seen this with my own eyes, I could not believe that the U.S. government is taking a child from the border. They're safe with us, and then just simply sending them on buses and planes within 10 to 14 days to people who are unvetted. Who's checking their backgrounds? No one.
Tonight, she breaks down the red flags she noticed, why she decided to blow the whistle on HHS, and what steps are needed to fix the system.
Cocaine can be sold one time, but a child can be sold over and over again, multiple times a day, year after year. They're making millions of dollars off of the lives of the children.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick.
Catholic Charities was one of the largest providers on the southern border, broke down completely. A study from the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women estimated that 60% of the unaccompanied alien children are caught by cartels and exploited through child pornography and drug trafficking. Here are some of the findings that have just been released by Congress in OIG investigation. There are actually 2 investigations. The Senate Minority Report found a jaw-dropping and chilling investigation of institutional gross neglect, shocking abuse, massive failure. No DNA was taken from the children or the people that accompanied them. No biometrics, no fingerprints, no background checks on the sponsors or any of the adults living in these sponsor homes. There were no photos, no age verification, no medical or physical assessment, no testing of infectious diseases on the border children. How do you look for 452,000 children with a blank slate? And Catholic Charities knew what they were doing in this dump and run operation. Children were placed in sponsor homes without even seeing the inside or living conditions of the home. Once placed in the home, these children, there was no follow-up with the children or the sponsors to determine if the children were alive, fed, schooled, clothed, receiving medical care, abused, and even still residing in the home. In fact, a help hotline was set up to assist the children. They received 65,000 calls in the first few months. There was no one assigned to answer the call. Based on my experience, there's one constant in child exploitation. Predators are heat-seeking missiles when it comes to targeting vulnerable children, and these were vulnerable children. And what really infuriates me is that Catholic Charities, the bishops, Catholic relief services knew damn well what they were doing at the border. They knew that they were facilitating human trafficking. Catholic Charities knew better than to participate in this high-stakes game of child exploitation. Because I worked with them for many, many years, for decades, and even for 60 years prior to that, Catholic Charities served as a provider for foster care in the United States in all the states for Child Protection Agency. More than anyone, Catholic Charities and the bishops knew the importance of stringent rules and policies to ensure that foster children were placed in safe and secure foster homes. Catholic Charities and the American bishops knew the necessity of ongoing vigilance for these vulnerable children. Catholic Charities and the American bishops knew full well the importance of criminal background checks, monthly home inspections, intense month-long parent and sponsor training to weed out the bad foster parent applicants. They knew that critical and mandatory procedures kept predators away from vulnerable children. Yet with all this institutional knowledge and experience, Catholic Charities ignored it all and made upwards of $8 billion to facilitate the largest invasion of illegal immigrants into the United States, and they abandoned children for a federal payday. While migrants, cartels, and terrorists stormed the south border of America, Pope Francis called it a human right. The Trump administration has recently located about just a mere 30,000 of these 452 missing children. Of those, we know this. Of the ones that they have found, some children were dead, some were trafficked, raped, some were not in school, some were severely neglected. Some of the sponsors have already been arrested and charged for child sexual exploitation and human trafficking. Buried in the interior of the United States are over 400,000 missing children from around the world who do not speak the language and are without a parent. Americans have yet to see the catastrophic results from this avoidable tragedy, which will unfold for generations to come. And while the Vatican bemoans the ecological cry of Mother Earth, whatever that is, we Americans must deal with the cry of these abandoned and missing children in our midst. And like the 2015 migration in Europe, this invasion will serve as the civilization kill switch for the United States as human trafficking nightmare unfolds within our country. And of course, public enemy number one, Jeffrey Epstein, may be the most prominent of the global traffickers, but he's certainly not the only one. And I have no doubt that there are many more Jeffrey Epsteins operating out there. But finally, I think it's important for all of us to remember that each of us plays a very important role in helping children. Most importantly, good, loving, supportive parents. And there is a message of hope in all this darkness, and I wanted to share it with you, coming from, of course, and I'm a great believer that the victims must speak. And here it is. Oops.
It's happening somewhere right now in our nice little neighborhoods.
The United States of America is one of the largest consumers of human trafficking.
Our children are being used for the commercial sex trade in our nation by our citizens.
Those people who are buying are fueling the market. If they weren't buying, there wouldn't be a market, there wouldn't be the traffickers.
Most of commercial sex is underage kids.
The first time that I was ever sold, I was 12 years old.
I was 10 years old, and he told me if I didn't shut up, he would do the same thing to my little sister.
Every girl who gets trafficked, that's somebody's baby girl.
Most people don't know that boys are trafficked too.
We oftentimes turn a blind eye to the exploitation and the things that are happening right beneath our noses.
You have no idea what a sex trafficked victim's life is like.
I was shackled around the ankle, was bolted down to the floor.
He would lock me in a room, and there would be various men come in and do whatever it is that they wanted to do.
And they're telling me how much I have to sell myself for. All I was worth was my body.
I can't have children because of all the abuse and all the abortions I was made to have.
At the Planned Parenthood facility where I worked, so I was having them sign these consent forms, sometimes for their 16th, 17th abortion procedure.
Where is God in all of this? And God immediately replies, where are you?
We are mandated by God, all of us, to be soldiers in this cause.
We're compelled by the Scripture to rescue them from the hand of the wicked.
It takes a work of the Holy Spirit in their lives to restore them.
God used a 2-year-old little girl in my life to save my life.
Once I gave my life back to God, everything changed.
It was the name that stood out.
I am God's precious creation, and I can say that now because I'm on this side of freedom.
The forgiveness was so freeing, like nothing I can ever explain.
That's the whole purpose of redemption. That's the whole purpose of the cross.
Well, our Catholic pro-life voices must flood the airwaves, the cyberspace, the public square to save the children. We are fed up with the elite power plays, their satanic games, their corrupt alliances, their filthy money, their blood sacrifices, their bloody wars, their phony jabs, and their deadly labs, their satanic child exploitation. We must yell from the rooftops to the global elites, your precious, fragile climate has indeed changed. The keys to the kingdom belong to Jesus Christ, not to you. Children need stable homes and families with loving parents and grandparents. And when they are not so fortunate, children need caring adults and as foster parents, as mentors, as adoptive parents. Children need teachers who inspire and protect, and they need police and law enforcement who will sacrifice and work endlessly to protect them and give them justice. Ladies and gentlemen, I am heartened that the scales are falling from our eyes. The elite demonic money lenders who prey on the vulnerable have been outed. We will not be canceled or gaslit or outmaneuvered. We do not trust you. We do not believe you. And most importantly, we vastly outnumber you by the billions, and we will defeat you. Catholics, we can do this. We can restore God's great earth to a Catholic culture flourished with large, loving families, a Catholic culture that built great schools, which educated generations of patriotic leaders. We need a Catholic renewal led by our Blessed Mother, the co-redemptrix, the mediatrix of all graces. And we must hold strong to the faith of our ancestors, despite the ongoing destruction in the Vatican. As dark clouds envelop the world, our country, and our church, it is now when we must re-enlist as soldiers of Christ, carrying the banner of our Savior and King, fortified by the words of Saint Therese, the little flower. In a letter to her beloved sister Celine, she wrote, "There remains nothing else for us to do but to fight. And when we don't have the strength, It is then that Jesus fights for us. And let it be said from this moment forward that there was a faithful cadre of Catholics who met here in Rome, in the eternal city, where so many saints and martyrs are buried, warriors for the faith who sacrificed their lives for Christ Almighty. Let us pledge our lives, our fortune, and our honor to the God-man from Nazareth and his blessed mother, and restore Christianity as the rightful heir of this blessed earth. Remember always, as Jesus exhorted us, it is the little children who will lead us. And finally, plead with God to shed his grace on thee. And turn to Our Lady of Fatima and ask her protection and intervention, confident that Our Lady's Immaculate Heart will triumph in the end. Our Lady, co-redemptrix, mediatrix of all graces, pray for us.
Hello, my friends. I want to thank you so much for your prayers, for your support for LifeSite News. We couldn't do this without you. We're right here in Rome, in the Eternal City. We're not going to cede Rome. We're not going to give up on the church. We're going to continue to fight despite everything they throw at us, and we need to do that with your help. I would beg for your support so that we can continue this work. It's coming up end of year, and I know many do end of year donations. Please consider LifeSite News in your giving. God bless you, my friends, and thank you.